For those of us who work in the urgent and emergency care system, it's felt by my colleagues, for instance, who work in the ambulance services, whether that's air ambulance services or land-based ambulance services, because their ambulances turn into ovens. It's felt by the staff who work in emergency departments that feel like ovens. It's felt by our patients all the way through, many of whom come in with heat-related illness, who quietly bake in our departments.
This summer's heat waves have put record demand on the NHS, and hospitals are struggling to cope. High temperatures have forced some to delay or cancel operations, while data shows that A&E units were busier in June than any winter month on record. Health officials believe that nearly 3,000 patients have died this summer as a result of complications linked to extreme weather. Well, Dr. Ian Higginson is the president of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Can we start with that statistic there I just read out, that nearly 3,000 patients have died this summer, and the fact that the A&E units are so busy in June? What is going on here? What's causing people the biggest impact?
Well, I think there's two underlying trends here. The most important underlying trend is that attendances to emergency departments have been progressively rising for many years. And our Royal College has been saying for many years that summers have been getting awful, as well as the winters being awful, if you like. So summers now are as bad as winters used to be when we were saying that winters were dreadful. So that underlying trend is not a surprise, and shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's responsible for planning services. We also know that heat causes additional stress for patients with certain conditions, particularly with chronic conditions, for some patients on some types of medications, and for those who are elderly or very young, and for various groups of other patients, and that places an additional burden on it. But I think what we don't want to see is the heat being the latest excuse for why things are doing so badly in the NHS, rather than fixing the underlying problems in the NHS that haven't been fixed for so long.
I mean, what can the government do then to help in this new pressure of the summer demand? I mean, as you say, that there is the long-term issue, and there's the staffing question, and there's all of the things that we've talked about before. But is there anything specific to the heat that the government should be looking at now? I mean, we've heard from people messaging in about how hot hospitals can be, and about how operations are being cancelled, for example, because of the temperatures.
Yes, well, again, it comes back to basic planning. So we've known that climate change and the man-made worsening of climate change has been developing for many years. We also know that the NHS estate is ridiculously under-maintained, and it's really quite old. There are several thousand buildings in the NHS that are older than the NHS itself, for instance, and there's a huge backlog of maintenance. So if you had someone on from a hospital facilities or estates department, for instance, I'm sure they would say to you, look, we've been raising our hand for years and years and saying, invest in our buildings. They're old. We're not fixing the boilers. We're not fixing the roofs. We've got to get ahead of this. And again, that hasn't been happening. So again, it comes back to basic planning. So that's the first thing we can do, is plan and invest. We can try and make buildings fit for purpose where they're too old, but there really needs to be a plan of renewal of NHS estate to get it fit for purpose as we go forward. And then finally, we can, within the NHS, as we can within government, make our own contribution to the reduction in the effects of man-made climate change. And our own Royal College has a programme that does that. For instance, we call it the Green ED, where we try and reduce the use of energy, we try and reduce the use of plastics or medicines which contribute to environmental harm. So it needs to be a three-pronged approach. We need to plan for what's happening in society anyway. We need to maintain and renew the estate so that it's resilient, and we can do our own bit towards net zero. But all of this comes back to basic failure to plan and basic failure to invest.
And where is the impact being felt the greatest at the moment? Where is the pressure greatest because of this impact of the heat that we're feeling right now? Is it in surgery, for example?
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues who work in operating theatres. Generally, the airflow systems in those theatres are pretty good, but they'll be backed up, I imagine, by mechanics that struggle in the heat. For those of us who work in the urgent and emergency care system, it's felt by My colleagues, for instance, who work in the ambulance services, whether that's air ambulance services or land-based ambulance services, because their ambulances turn into ovens. It's felt by the staff who work in emergency departments that feel like ovens. It's felt by our patients all the way through, many of whom come in with heat-related illness, who quietly bake in our departments. And speaking to my colleagues and friends on the wards, it's felt beyond our doors in hospitals, which are also very, very hot, and because of all the design flaws, can feel like greenhouses, essentially. So it's felt by our poor patients and by the staff who are working in conditions which wouldn't be acceptable in most other industries.
Well, I was just going to ask that finally, Dr. Higginson. Should there be an appropriate temperature for staff to be working at?
Oh, yes, of course there should. There should be all sorts of things that apply to staff who work within the NHS. We should be working in environments that are fit for purpose, that aren't too hot in the summer, and actually many times very hot in the winter, because the heating systems are so rubbish you can't get the temperature right whatever time of year it is. We should be able to access hot food. We should be able to access rest areas. We shouldn't be exposed to violence and aggression every day. Unfortunately, working in the NHS does lead one rather to feel that the words about looking after staff aren't necessarily matched by basic actions. But we also need to remember there are two groups of patients in every hospital or NHS, two groups of people in any NHS area. There are those who work in that area, and there are those who we're trying to treat in that area. Yeah. And both groups don't get a good deal out of the current situation.
Dr. Ian Higginson, President of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's going to be 33 degrees today where we are. The thought of having to go to hospital in 33-degree heat, it's terrifying, actually. And particularly if someone in your family is old and infirm. And
imagine if you were on a maternity unit today, which are notoriously hot anyway, as it goes.
I remember my little one, my youngest one, she was born in a heat wave, and the room that we went into it nearly knocked me over. I mean, my wife was fine with it because she could handle the heat, and also just had a baby, so it wasn't that bad for her. But I was just like, this is the end of the world. I don't know how you're coping. But I felt that throughout the process, if I'm honest.